Hello, and welcome to Parenting for Thought, the podcast where we talk about things that parents want to know, but even if not, we're here anyways. And I've got Jason Dobbie here with me today, and Jason and I met through the magic of the Instagram algorithm. I don't know if you found me first or I found you first. Who found
I'm
who
not
first?
sure. I think you reached out to me first.
I think you might have followed me and liked one of my posts. And then I was like, who's this? Who's Transformative Pathways? And then I went and looked at you and I saw some stuff about men supporting men. And I was like, this is a guy I need to know. I want this for my audience. So I remember reaching out to you first and that was it. And now we're friends and you can't get rid of me.
Yeah.
Jason, who are you? What do you do?
My name is Jason. I'm a life coach. I just started my coaching business this year. I was a chef for most of my life. I was a professional chef for 26 years. And just a couple of years ago, I realized I wasn't happy with my life and I wasn't happy with my career. So I knew it was time to make a change and I didn't know what that change was. So I left the cooking industry and I got a job in sales selling seafood. And I'm still doing that now. That's my day job. And then just this year, through working with some different mentors, I decided that I wanted to do something to help people. So in that, I started my own coaching business beginning of this year. And yeah, that's where I'm at now. I run a meditation group. I have my coaching business called Transformative Pathways. I'm launching a men's group program next year. 2025 is going to be a 12-week one-on-one men's group program called The Journey Within. And I'm also launching the Transformative Pathways podcast in 2 weeks on December 7th. So yeah.
I'm already signed up to be a guest.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I got to say, I really love this chef to coach transition. I think that those of us who end up in positions where we help people, like where we super directly help people, I feel like all of us started out doing something that was in some way connected to supporting people. We just hadn't found quite the way that we wanted to be doing that yet. Like, you cannot convince me that being a chef is not helping people. Like, you're literally feeding people, and that's such a beautiful thing. And like, my background was also in sales. So I'm hardly surprised that you went from chef to sales to coach. And in my personal selling philosophy, it was always about meeting the needs of that customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also being a chef, like one of the favorite parts of my job was mentoring my staff. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that end up working in a kitchen sometimes have a troubled background or have a troubled life. So I've been mentoring people in a way, I've been coaching people all along.
Again, similar over here where I started as a sales associate and like within a year later, I was in management. And I loved being part of like the hiring process of like getting to know somebody and seeing if they would be a good fit, seeing if I would be able to be a good fit for them. And, I didn't have the same skill sets back then as I do now. I mean, we're talking about, I was in my early 20s, but I was so drawn to it. And I loved making that connection with people and figuring out what I could do for them and what they could do for me. And it was a really cool symbiotic relationship that I really enjoyed. So, Jason, what is the thing that you are most passionate about?
I recently discovered the last couple of years, I was on kind of a spiritual journey looking for my life's purpose. And I kind of discovered that I'm supposed to be helping people. So that's kind of been my mission the last couple of years is service to others in whatever way I can. That's why I started my meditation group, because meditation kind of changed my life so much. And I guess, that's another thing I'm really passionate about is meditation. Mm-hmm. When I first got sober 10 years ago and I was going through all my stuff, I ended up in a meditation group and that immensely changed my life and really helped me on my journey. So I feel like I'm trying to spread awareness to others about the power of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those would be my big two. And I've always been the guy that everyone goes to with their problems and for advice. So I feel like that's part of my purpose. So that's another one of the reasons why I decided to start my coaching business and go this route.
So, I mean, my audience is all parents, right? So, and you're a parent. You have two kids?
Three daughters.
3 kids, and there's twins and then a younger one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two 6-year-olds and an 8-year-old.
Whew. So, how does meditation factor into your parenting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say it's been a huge part of my parenting. For one, it's hard to find time to meditate because everyone says, "Oh, I don't have time," especially when you have kids. So, the only time you can really do it is if you wake up before everyone wakes up in the morning, which is my favorite time of the day, assuming that your kids sleep in. I remember when my kids were little, and they say when you're learning meditation that you should be able to meditate no matter what distractions are going on. You're not always going to have this quiet, calm environment. So I remember lying on the floor, and my kids were little, and they couldn't even walk yet, and they were just crawling and playing all over me, and I would just lie on the floor and do a meditation while they're playing and banging and crying and all that stuff. But I think how it's helped my parenting is it's really helped me kind of find that space, where something happens, and before I react, I have that sort of space in between to make a choice of how I want to react. Whereas before I was very, something would happen, I would react right away. But now I have that, that space in the middle where I can make a decision. Okay, how do I want to react to this? And I'm a lot more calmer. And I was a calm person before I had kids, but kids will push you to your limits. And I remember thinking like, man, I'm a calm guy and I'm yelling at my kids and I'm punching the walls and I'm going crazy here. And I can't imagine what other people's houses look like because I'm a calm guy. I'm easygoing. But, I don't yell at my kids anymore. Obviously there's times when you do have to yell at them to get their attention, but I'm pretty calm and cool and collective. And I think that I'd like to think that that's going to carry over into them because I'm leading by example and because they're going to do what I'm going to do. Right. So, leading back to that, there was a time when I practiced meditation for a long time before I had kids, but nothing can get you ready for having kids. And it was just crazy. We had 3 under the age of 2. So our house was just mental and we didn't sleep. And, I used to get mad and have temper tantrums and stomp my feet and yell and scream. And now my oldest daughter, she does those things. And I say to my wife, she does that because of me. She learned that from me because that's what I did. So I can't get mad at her because, realizing that I'm the one that taught her those things.
Yeah.
And, and bedtime's a good example too, because bedtime can be frustrating when you have 3 kids running around that don't want to get ready for bed. And that's when they want to play WrestleMania and go crazy. But I set a goal a couple of years ago that I wasn't going to yell at bedtime anymore. And if I got to that point, I would just walk away because, what do my kids do? They yell at each other. And I said to my wife, they're yelling at each other because we're yelling at them. So trying to switch that now. And, even like last night was a perfect example. I just noticed how calm I was at bedtime. And I find the more calm I am, then the more calm they're going to be. The more riled up that I'm going to be, then that energy is just going to carry over into them. So I think meditation is a huge, huge thing. And we even play, meditations on Spotify. There's these little stories and stuff you can play, which are really good. And sometimes my kids are into it. Sometimes they're not. It's hard to force a kid to do a meditation, but, even just the calm music at bedtime really helps, I find.
Oh, yeah. I know I've got my favorites that I've used with clients over the years. I love this realization that you had of my kids are doing what I've shown them how to do. I was just talking with a client this morning, a father, and one of the things that I noticed that he would do in my observations of him with his kids, he talks really, really quickly, like so quick that it's hard for me to follow him sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I said, this next week, try speaking like you're literally on slow-mo, slow everything way down and choose only the most essential words. Like, let's go really, really concrete and start there and see what happens. And so he implemented that. And so today was the follow-up, and he was beaming, and he was so excited because the impact that it had on not just his kids, but his wife as well. Everybody around him felt calmer. And the words that he said, which I totally started to cry. Anybody who knows me well knows that I'm a crier. I get so emotional about, when parents have these big aha moments. And he was saying, the three people that matter the most in the world to me, the three people I love the most, are the most affected by this change in my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. And this is one of the reasons why, I reached out to you. This whole idea of men supporting men is so, so important. There's so many women's spaces. There's so many spaces for moms, and we need those, and moms need those. And I'm glad that those exist. But in my time working with parents, I have come across so many fathers who feel very helpless, or they feel like there's nowhere for them to go. They don't even have the skill set to reach out to their fellow father friends to talk about what it means to be a dad and what it means to unlearn what they got taught by their dads and how to implement something new. So then what I see practically is I see a lot of dads who their number one goal is just to be present for their kids, because like they saw that their dad wasn't present and they felt the effects of that. And they're like, nope, we're going to change that. I'm going to be present for my kids, which is amazing. But then there's this, the pendulum swings perhaps either too far or in the wrong direction. And they show up for their kids, but then there's no parenting skill sets behind that. And what ends up happening is all they know how to do is play, for example, WrestleMania. And then there's none of this other teaching. So have you had any clients where you've talked about parenting as a father? Does that come up very often for you?
No, that hasn't really come up yet. Honestly, most of my clients have been female as of right now. And when I was designing my program, originally I was going to do a mix like male and female program. And then I had, as you say, like maybe a couple of signs from the universe, like 3 in a row that kind of told me that, okay, I think I need to create a space for men because, a lot of guys out there are struggling, and I didn't really realize how bad it actually was. And like you said, there's so many spaces for women to go, but not so many spaces for men to go. And I think my challenge is going to be, how do I get these guys to come and work with me? Because a lot of guys have been conditioned to not ask for help and do it on their own. And if they talk about their feelings, they're weak. And so I think that's going to be my biggest challenge. But I think once I start my program in the new year and get it going and get some momentum and get some testimonials going, it's going to be good. But I think that parenting is a big thing. And I was just thinking, I need to add a part of that to my program for sure. That should be a big focus, because part of my ideal client is working with parents. So that should definitely be something that we focus on. And maybe we should have you come in as a guest or do a guest module. I think we talked about that. So I'm going to
I would love to
follow up with you on that.
I would absolutely love to. At the heart of it, I want to see parents succeed. And I think that, societally, we fail parents so miserably. People go into having kids, by and large, I'm making a sweeping generalization here, and I know that. So if anybody takes issue with what I'm saying, ask me what I really, really think, and I'll fill in the gaps. But by and large, people go into having kids because they want to have kids. They're excited about it. They're amped. They're like, woo, baby. And, baby's first Christmas and all these interesting things and the milestones. And then the day-to-day stuff starts. And, kids trigger us perhaps faster than anything else in the world can. As you said, You were calm. You've always been a calm guy, but your kids triggered you to the point of punching walls. I mean, that's extreme, right?
Yeah.
That's not a reasonable response by any stretch. But when we're pushed to our limits, that's what happens. So we need those coping strategies. And especially for men who have societally been taught to punch rather than to do something like a breathing technique or a meditative technique. So do you have a favorite type of meditation technique that you use when your kids are doing their WrestleMania?
Yeah, the main one I use is just breath awareness. So just, taking a couple deep breaths. That's the main thing. And going back to another point I wanted to bring up there that I thought of when you were talking was, when we first we had no idea what the hell we were doing. We went to these parenting classes and stuff. But I remember a big influence on me and my wife was both of our parents telling us, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this.
Wow.
I would do that. I would do that. And one of the things that they told us was that we're too nice and we need to start yelling at our kids, because me and my wife are both very calm. So we kind of changed our strategy and we started yelling at our kids more. And if I can go back in time, I never would have did that. But when I was a kid and I got out of line, then my parents would give me the belt or give me a spanking. And, my mom would always say, like, what I'd be doing if that was my kid. And I'm just like, I'm not doing that. But
you traumatized me, Grandma.
And on the other hand, I said to my wife the other day, and I said, this raising emotionally balanced children is a hard thing to do. And I saw a post about this the other day too, because, when we were kids, or when I was a kid, if I got out of line, I would get the belt or get whatever. So I was so scared to do anything. Whereas my kids don't have that fear. So I understand why they did that, to keep us in line. But, my kids don't have that fear of getting a spanking or getting the belt or whatever. So that they're a lot more open and they're free, but they're not closed off like I was when I was a kid. So, I was closed off and I wasn't myself because I was always afraid. So It is very difficult to raise kids this way, but in the long run, I think it's going to be worth it for their emotional well-being, for sure. It's very interesting.
Yeah. It's not even a question, right? Like, the people who are going to find this podcast are going to be people who are committed to not physically harming their children and are looking for a way to parent with the least amount of emotional harm. Yeah, a lot of the work that I do is helping parents realize where their triggers stem from. It's a lot of this like inner child work, and which is beautiful, but grueling. It's brutal to go back and go, wow, I was really traumatized by my parent, who is traumatized by their parent, who is traumatized by their parent, and so on and so forth. And I feel like this generation, or the generations who are parents now, I'm seeing more and more folks being really committed to learning new techniques, which is a messy process. And, going from physically abusing a child to then saying, well, I refuse to yell, but I don't have the skill sets to set the boundaries. So then you end up having permissive parenting, and your kids are wild and chaotic without any sort of structure or boundaries. And then you have grandparents stepping in saying, well, if you just yelled at them, they'd stop misbehaving. And it's that spot right in there that I think perhaps I'm most passionate about, which is the teaching parents a unique way of setting boundaries with really warm and loving and clear communication frameworks. That's where all the results are. That's where the relationship gets built. That's where trust happens. That's where healthy attachment styles happen. That's the good stuff.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about inner child work, I wanted to share something on that too. And I remember one point not that long ago, I remember thinking or even saying to my wife, I wish we didn't even have kids. I wish we didn't even have kids. This is so
Wow.
hard. This is, but I was in that sort of lack mindset where, poor me, I don't have time for myself. I can never do anything I want to do and all this stuff. And then I sort of flipped that mindset and my perspective. And I had this realization that, because I was doing some inner child work and stuff too. And I want to touch on that as well. But then I realized that, wow, I looked at it from a different perspective, but I realized like, wow, look at how much growth I've had since I've had my kids and my own personal growth. And then I went from thinking, I wish I didn't have kids to, I'm so grateful I went through all this stuff because it made me the person I am today. Without going through all that, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. The amount of growth I've had in the past 6-8 years is just unbelievable. So just that perspective shift. And the other thing that I wanted to say about inner child work is, I've done my fair share of inner child work. Recently, I remember last year, I asked my mom for a picture of me when I was a kid, and she's like, well, what do you need that for? And I was trying to explain to her, and she didn't really understand. But I have a picture of myself from, when I was like 4 or 5 years old on this little thing beside my bed that I look at all the time. And a big thing for me that helped me with my inner child work was looking at my parents in the perspective of, instead of being mad at them for what they did or what they didn't do or who they were or who they weren't, actually forgiving them and knowing that they were just doing the best they could with what they had. And once I was able to kind of let that go, because I was holding on to a lot of anger. Oh, I wish my parents did this. Oh, I wish they did this. And I wish they were more like this. But then looking at, the childhoods they had, my mom grew up with 9 brothers and sisters, and she left home. She left home when she was 14 years old. She dropped out of school, and she had me when she was 18. And I remember having that realization, like, my mom didn't even have a childhood.
Yeah.
So, looking at it that way, like, she did the best she could, and, she did a really good job when she was a kid. So she did a really good job as a mother. So I can't be mad at her. Sure, I wish maybe things were maybe different, but that's the way it is. So that forgiveness was a huge part of my inner child work, and just letting things go and having a good cry and letting it all out. And
I relate to this so much. I'm actually no contact with both of my parents who have been divorced for a long time now, and I know very well how my mother was raised and how she was harmed by her parents. And for me, forgiveness is such a personal journey. And what one person means by forgiveness is not what the next person means by it, right? For me, it was less about forgiveness and more about holding space for her inner child, for what she went through, and recognizing that in her own way, she also stopped cycles of abuse. There are things that she didn't do to me that her parents did to her. So, she moved the needle. She improved things. She didn't raise me how I would have raised me. And she didn't raise me in a way that honored all of who I am. And there's a lot of harm that I carry because of that. And so for me, it's about like if you picture a large circle and then you put many smaller circles inside of that, that's how I picture it for myself, where I hold a circle for my mom and her inner child, and another one for the mom that she was to me, and another one for my anger towards her for how she treated me anyways, because it still wasn't okay. And there's all these different circles, and sometimes one's a little bigger, sometimes one's a little smaller, but they're all contained and they all have space. And that's the visual that works for me. Whether somebody might call that forgiveness or not is entirely up to their interpretation of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that was what was so healing for me, was to get to a point where instead of saying, I blanket forgive you and you're welcome in my life was to get to a place where I said, you know, I am deeply sorry and angry on your behalf that you were so harmed. And the way that you treat me and interact with me at this stage of my life is still so not okay that I need to set a really hard boundary and go no contact.
Wow.
Yeah. Tough stuff, right?
It is, yeah. And just a quick note on forgiveness. Like one thing I've learned about forgiveness too, forgiveness is such a powerful thing, forgiving yourself or forgiving other people. But one thing that I've learned from my mentors as well is that when you forgive someone, and I just wanted to say this for the listeners too, when you forgive someone, it doesn't mean that you're saying that what they did to you was right, or you're letting that go. No, that's not the point at all. You're forgiving them for yourself, and you're releasing that energy that you're holding on to. And it's not saying what they did was right. What they did was still wrong, and you can still be angry at them and forgive them. So
Love that.
I just wanted to make that point. And
an important point.
Parents are a hard one too. And, like, I don't think my mom's going to listen to this anyways, but, since I've been making all the changes in my life, I quit drinking a long time ago. And I think my relationship with my mom changed when I quit drinking, because we don't have that, drinking thing in common. And when she's drinking, I don't want to talk to her on the phone. I don't want to be around her, because
right.
I don't want that in my life. Like I grew up with my parents used to drink a lot, and there was always parties and all that stuff going on. So that's one thing that I really wanted to change for my kids. Like, my kids have never seen me drunk, and they've never even really been around drinking. But, since I've been making all these changes in my life, and my mom even told me one time, she's like, I don't really like all these changes that you're making. And I knew that that's sort of something that's going to happen, because when you make changes for the good in your life, sometimes the people around you don't like it because you're changing. And I said, that's all normal, and, that happens. But so I don't really talk to my mom a lot, but it's not by any choice. We just don't really talk very often. And, it's kind of too bad, but I think, one day maybe she'll come around. She's still got a lot of her stuff she has to work through, and no one can do it except for her. So when she's ready, she'll come around.
I feel like you're so perfectly demonstrating something that I've been thinking about the entire time we've been talking, which is about how kids are mirrors of their parents. And the way that it's crossing these generational boundaries too is so impactful. And it's, you saw your kids modeling your behavior back to you, and you recognize, oh, no, that's not okay. And then with your mom, you're making these changes. She's seeing that mirror and recognizing that the reflection is different now, and that she doesn't see herself in those changes. And I can't speak for her. I don't know what's going through her mind, but I wonder if perhaps that's feeling a bit scary. And that's why she's like, I don't like these changes, because am I not going to be a part of this anymore? But I don't know that generation has that language. They didn't get raised with that language. They didn't learn how to speak openly and honestly about these kinds of things.
No.
Not to say that our generation is doing it perfectly either, but there's been a huge undeniable shift, right?
Yeah, we're definitely learning. We're definitely doing our best.
There it is. We're doing our best. So for my audience and anybody listening, Jason, if there was one thing that you wish someone would walk away today knowing, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess it would just be, we kind of talked on it about how, what you do has such a huge impact on your kids, and you're such an influence. So, going back to meditation, and the one way I like to look at meditation is, when I meditate, I'm not just doing it for me. I'm doing it for my family, my friends, and, for the whole world. So that's, if that's one way that it could get parents out there to practice meditation, when they realize they're not just doing it for themselves, they're doing it for their kids, they're doing it for their family, they're doing it for their friends, because it's going to change the way you show up. It's going to change the way you react. And then also, we can get into the collective consciousness, and every time you meditate, you're affecting the whole collective consciousness of the world as well. So, but just keeping it in the whole family dynamic is, if you're not going to take the time to do it for yourself, then maybe you'll take the time to do it for your kids or for your family.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Jason, where can people find you if they want to hear more from you or want to know more about what you do?
You can find me on Instagram at transformative_pathways. And if you wanted to reach out to me directly, feel free to shoot me an email at jason@transformativepathways.ca. And I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being my second ever guest on
Awesome.
Parenting for Thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emry.